Wow, what a great turnout. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you and welcome to what was the Broadway and 61st Street Park. I'm Travis DiNicola. I'll be your MC today. I'm the Executive Director of Indy Reads and Indy Reads Books, and also the co-host of The Art of the Matter on WFYI, and I'm very proud to say a friend of Dan Wakefield. Before we get started, I want to give a big thanks to someone very special, and that's Pat Chastain, who is the person who made this park possible with his efforts to get it named. Patrick, thank you so much. And what's really amazing is Patrick didn't even know Dan before he started on this whole adventure. We'll hear from you in a bit, Dan. Easy there. You're going to hear from a lot of great people today. I do want to just acknowledge some people that are here today. Many of you that will be speaking, of course, Senator Lugar, Mayor Hogsett, Indy Parks is here, the Friends of the 61st and Broadway Park Group, the Vonnegut Library, IPS CFI 84, Shortridge High School, writers Barb, Shoop, and Will Higgins, the representative for this district, Colleen Fanning, and so many other friends of Dan. Thank you all for being here today. And now, let me introduce to you Linda Broadfoot, the director of Indy Parks.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this awesome, awesome park on this awesome, awesome day. My name is Linda Broadfoot. I'm the director of Indy Parks, and I have the pleasure of serving with all these fine people to help make our 210 parks awesome in Indianapolis. So a separate career ago, I had the pleasure of leading the Indianapolis Public Schools Education Foundation. And IPS. In that organization's in charge of the IPS Hall of Fame. And as soon as I found that out, and it was shortly after Dan had moved back to Indianapolis, and I found out he wasn't yet in the IPS Hall of Fame, I began beating down doors saying, you all, we've got to get this done. We've got to get Dan Wakefield into the IPS Hall of Fame. So I turned to my friend Travis DiNicola, who helped nominate Dan, and we got him into the IPS Hall of Fame probably, 3 years ago now? Yeah, so 3 years ago now. So that's just one of many of the great honors that I've had the pleasure to witness for the fabulous Dan Wakefield. So thank you guys for being here. Thanks for supporting this park. Thank you for loving these great folks that are a part of our community. And with that, I get to introduce my boss, Mayor Joe Hogsett.
Well, good afternoon. I would be remiss if I didn't begin this afternoon by telling you, after 150 days as mayor of this city, I consider myself a wily veteran with big shoes to fill. You know, when you try to live up to the standards set by people like a Dick Lugar, those are big shoes to fill. And I am indeed honored to be the mayor of this city, sitting alongside one who we used to call our mayor, former Senator Richard Lugar. Senator. But we're not here today because of Joe Hogsett or for Dick Lugar. We're here because of the importance of Indy Parks and the importance of Dan Wakefield to Indianapolis. For more than 50 years, Dan has written some of the most influential and thought-provoking fiction and nonfiction in both the 20th and 21st centuries. He's an author who has encouraged us to question our culture. He's an author who has caused us to challenge many, if not most, of our assumptions. And he is an author who can do all of this while making us laugh, both uncomfortably and uncontrollably. Going All the Way was a cutting-edge novel, and yet this day it remains so. It forced residents of our city to examine our life here in Indianapolis, and it caused us to examine the world around us. When it was first published, some nearly 50 years ago, it permitted Indianapolis to come to terms with some of our city's less desirable past, to give this city a chance to look at itself in ways that we had not necessarily viewed ourselves before. And so it is, we are here nearly 50 years later with a city that is not the same city Sonny and Gunner knew it was, right? We now have a city that has grown up, and we have become the great city that Indianapolis is today. Kurt Vonnegut once wrote that there is a little bit of Indianapolis in everything I write. I think of, from Booth Tarkington to John Green, all the authors who have made Indianapolis a literary center, including, of course, Dan Wakefield. They all have our great city within them. No matter what the period, no matter what the genre, look closely and you'll find smidgens of Indianapolis in everything they write. It is indeed a great city. I am proud to stand with Dan Wakefield. I am proud to be here with his classmate from Shortridge High School and dedicate this park on behalf of all of the citizens of this great city that we call home. This is in our home, that great city of Indianapolis, and it is now known as Dan Wakefield Park. I thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. It is truly an honor to be here today for this dedication. A little over a month ago, Indy Reads, where I'm the executive director, honored Dan Wakefield with our annual Literacy Leader Hall of Fame Award, which recognizes those whose efforts have made a significant impact on Indy Reads' mission of helping adults learn how to read. We did this to recognize all the support that Dan has given to Indy Reads over the years, especially in making dozens of appearances and author talks at our bookstore, where the staff refer to him as our patron saint. We also honored Dan because of his incredible career as a journalist, essayist, fiction writer, and screenwriter. And most of you know the basic biography of Dan. He went to Shortridge, spent 50s in New York, became friends with Vonnegut, wrote Going All the Way, went to Hollywood, then began writing about spiritual autobiographies, moved back to Indy, and now hangs out at the Red Key and Indy Reads books. Yeah. That's all true, but it is all true. But there is so much more to this brilliant and complicated man. Over the past 4 years, I'm very proud to say that I've become a close friend of Dan and have learned so much more about him and from him. And I've been trying to read as much of his work as I can find. And to begin with, he has written other novels besides Going All the Way. And it'd be hard for me to pick a favorite, but both Home Free and Starting Over are incredibly truthful and moving. And I think if Hemingway had written about the late 60s and hippies, it would have read like Home Free. But Dan's parody of Hollywood, Selling Out, has to be one of the absolute funniest books I have ever read. And I do want to mention that all of 5 Dan's novels and his book New York in the 50s are available now as ebooks. A few other highlights of Dan's career I'd like to make note of that you may not be aware of. He was the first Western journalist to interview Golda Meir. He also profiled Bobby Kennedy, William F. Buckley, and so many others in his magazine articles. In fact, over the past 60 years, Dan has written hundreds, if not thousands, of articles for magazines and newspapers, including the New York Times, including both their book review and their magazine, Harper's, The Nation, GQ, Esquire, Playboy, Yoga Journal, locally here with Nuvo and the Broad Ripple magazine, and the Atlantic Monthly. In fact, it was the Atlantic Monthly was the first national magazine to give an entire issue over to one author when they had Dan write about Vietnam in March 1968 for the issue Supernation at Peace and War. And Dan never stops writing or searching for the truth. Recently, he's been working on a piece about the celebration of the Crispus Attucks basketball team state championship in the 50s. Dan Wakefield is an important and talented writer, and Indianapolis is fortunate to be able to call him ours. What a wonderful thing to be able to name this park after him today. And it's actually a pretty rare thing to do, to name a park after someone while they're still alive. So, Dan, all we ask of you is not to do anything embarrassing today. I want to introduce our next speaker, Phyllis Boyd, the director of Groundwork.
Hi, good afternoon. Dan and I met last year at the Spirit and Plays public conversation, and I was a member of the panel, and he gave the keynote speech, and it was the 20th anniversary, and he was a member of the original panel, so that's why he was there, and we were lucky enough to meet. Since then, we have become fast friends, and you can find us sometimes at the Red Key, having burgers and wine, and having great conversation. When we were a part of the public conversation, the subject of it was dreams and dreams of our city. And you know, when you think of cities, they can be thought of as having three different kinds of spaces. The first space is your home. The second space is your school or your work. And the third spaces are those places that are the place that you go to have fun, entertain yourself, to mix with other people. So they're markets and movies and places like parks. And parks are extremely critical components of vibrant neighborhoods and vibrant cities. And like the other third spaces, they give us the opportunity to exercise our civility, to test our compassion, and to connect with each other and to have fun. And Dan, I'm really honored to be a part of this park dedication for you, and I'm especially honored that you asked me to read words of one of our favorite authors, James Baldwin. So this is from autobiographical notes from Notes of a Native Son. I love America more than any country in the world, and exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually. I think all theories are suspect, that the finest principles may have to be modified or may even be pulverized by the demands of life, and that one must find, therefore, one's own moral center and move through the world hoping that this center will guide one aright. I consider that I have many responsibilities, but none greater than this, to last, as Hemingway says, and get my work done. I want to be an honest man and a good writer. Thank you for being one, Dan.
Thank you, Phyllis. Next up, I'd like to have the director of the Indiana Writers Center, Barb Shoop, join us. Barb?
I have a personal interest in this park being named for Dan because I've lived across the street from this park since 1969. My kids grew up here. My grandkids play here. I've watched countless wonderful neighborhood kids grow up and graduate from college, one of them last week, and they just keep coming. One of my greatest pleasures is a summer day when I walk my dog around the park, and it's just full of little kids, and they're all yelling and screaming and splashing each other, and there are people with dogs, and there are people playing volleyball, and there are people playing tennis, and it's a great park. If you close your eyes, it smells like the beach because it's suntan lotion. I love that about our park. This is a park that people use. It's a neighborhood park, and people care about it. We had a cleanup day this spring, getting prepared for this day, for Dan's dedication. And just last weekend, I saw one of my neighbors, Rick, painting the picnic tables blue. If you look around, you'll see these brand new painted picnic tables. he just did that on Saturday afternoon. I just thought that was amazing that he would, spend his own money and his own time to do that. So this is the kind of park it is. And I couldn't be happier to know that as of today, this park is officially the Dan Wakefield Park. I love Dan's work, which I think is important and good. I especially love Going All the Way, which has a scene that's set right here in this park. So I think that's pretty cool. Well, maybe we'll get that put in something and put it up somewhere someday. That would be really cool. I also love Dan. He's a wonderful person whose homecoming has made Indianapolis literary life much richer. He deserves a park at the very least. And as the executive director of the Indiana Writers Center, I look forward to making Dan Wakefield Park a place where, at least a few times a year, writers will gather to share their work and get to know one another better. I have a lot of really good plans for this. So thanks to everybody who made this happen, especially Pat and Dan. We're going to be spending a lot of time in your park. Thanks for coming. This is so cool.
Thank you, Barb. Next up, the man who organized the Going All the Way bus tours. That would be the Indianapolis Star's Will Higgins.
Well, I first met Dan Wakefield years ago because he was a celebrity and the writer of these great best-selling books, been made into major motion pictures starring people that you've heard of, like Burt Reynolds, Jill Clayburgh, Candice Bergen, and later Ben Affleck, Rachel Weisz, Jeremy Davies. And I'm the newspaper reporter, so he's in town visiting from Boston to give a talk at the library. So, of course, I interview him. I ask a lot of questions. He answers the questions. That's how this business works. And then over the next few years, he came back to town several other times, and I would interview him some more and ask more questions, and we got to know each other. And there came a time when Dan started asking me questions, and we were becoming friends, and we've become friends, and he's very good at friendship. And so now I too go to the Red Key with Dan. And we talk about Indianapolis, how it used to be and how it is. And he turned me on to Bunny Berrigan. So now I'd like to read a passage from Dan's Returning a Spiritual Journey, which came out in 1988, and which the New York Times called a remarkably candid account of a prodigal son returning home. Harpy was our great driver, a natural person with a car, and driving with him was a kind of meditation. It was what he did to think, and you too were able to think when Harpy was driving. You could relax because you didn't have to worry about him doing anything crazy or stupid behind the wheel, and you could sit back and let yourself be lulled by the hum of the motor and the bright white eyes of other cars passing in the dark. After being at Aunt Ollie's with Harpy one night, I remember driving with him even farther out north of town where only occasional lights, like distant beacons, shone from lone farmhouses scattered over that dear flat land. And I had the feeling of acceptance and protection, of it being all right that we were really in the dark, not knowing where we were headed. I sensed the peace that sometimes comes from being aware of what we don't know and being beside a friend. Thank you.
Will, thank you very much. It is now my great honor to introduce Dan's classmate from Shortridge, the Honorable Senator Richard Lugar.
What a glorious day this is for all of us. I appreciate so much all of your being here. It's wonderful to be with a mayor who is off to a great start, and I appreciated his words and his presence. I appreciate likewise the fact that we are celebrating today an Eagle Scout. Dan's early years were guided the right way, and he became an Eagle Scout, an honor that we share, and we appreciated that when we met each other at Shortreach High School. As it turned out, I grew up at 5618 Washington Boulevard, not too far away from here, as a matter of fact. Dan was within a few blocks, although we did not know each other then. I attended school 84, first 3 years, my being in Indianapolis. A wonderful school. Dan was at 80. But we did come together at Shortreach High School. And we came together really because of the help of a beautiful lady, Jean Grubb, who monitored the Shortreach Daily Echo, was the journalism teacher at Shortreach High School. We had a daily paper, one of the unique papers of any high school in the United States of America. This gave opportunities for students like Dan and myself. I was author of a Thursday column called Shooting the Works, and Dan was on the Friday Echo with Sport Life. Dan was a very serious writer even in those days. He covered sports very, very crisply, but very accurately. I was inclined occasionally in my coverage of everything to get into reform efforts, such as I suggested that it was shocking that members of the basketball team were smoking and drinking the previous Thursday night. This brought a reaction not only from Jean Grubb, who Dan and I loved, but from Joel Hadley, the principal, who summoned me to the office and said, "Do you realize on Thursday the school board reads the Echo?" It was a very dispiriting moment, even as I was revealing secrets that I felt were very important. But it led to a certain contrast that I don't wish to highlight today, but seeing Dan, and we've had a wonderful lunch experience together, it reminds me that I was interested in politics. My dad had allowed me to stay up until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning hearing Wendell Willkie nominated as President of the United States on the Republican side. And my brother and I squirmed down to the Monument Circle, got right underneath the great man when he was speaking from the English Theater balcony. It was sort of in my DNA, I suppose. I got to Shortreach and I ran for the junior class presidency and lost. I ran for the senior class presidency and I lost. My goodness, I was hoping for some break. They had what was called the Bluebell and Uglyman contest. These were the most popular girls and the most popular boys in Shortreach High School. I was not nominated. Dan was, of course, a very popular boy. Well then, to top things off, I won with 3 brilliant young guys who became great lawyers, the state debating championship and a number of speaking contests, and had fully expected to be the speaker at our commencement. Wrong again. It was Dan giving the speech. So this is a washout. I suppose, you know, as you look back on it, I was a no smoke, no drink, no fool around type, Methodist Youth Fellowship all the way, and that wasn't quite really, I think, the platform that we needed for that time. I went to Denison, and there I ran for president of the Denison Christian Emphasis Program. Now we're talking. Victory, finally. Even better still, the student body presidency, it was a co-presidency, way ahead of the times. Women and men voting for each other and so forth. The other co-president was Charlene Smeltzer of Detroit. Later I had met remotely in philosophy class. But I got to know her much better, and before long we were pinned, and we married 60 years this year. So politics does have some redeeming features in all of this. Throughout all of this, I was watching Dan's career. He continued to think about writing and expression. But I must say that with the publication of Going All the Way, my goodness, what a book. As has been pointed out many times, Kurt Vonnegut, dear friend of Dan's, pointed out it would be impossible for him to return to this ceremony or any place else in Indianapolis for that matter. And That was probably overstressing it, I suppose, but nevertheless, it did describe a part of Indianapolis. It described it well. I just queried Dan out of curiosity. I said, Dan, how many copies of Going All the Way were published and sold? He said, well, over 1 million copies. This is really a Hoosier author. 1 million copies of a single book, and he's written 5 great novels. One thing, though, that I want to emphasize today is that in later years, and by that I mean, say, the last 20 or 25 or so, Dan has found a spiritual backing, really an opportunity, not only to take a look at his own faith, but likewise to share thoughts with others, to have in this city ways in which people can come together in a clinic or workshop to be able to express what is deep in their hearts and souls. Dan writes about this so well, but so do others through his tutelage and through his encouragement. This is a spiritual guide, a man who has thought a great deal about life, persons all over the globe, who has served so well so many. When it came to the possibility that this beautiful park might be named for Dan Wakefield, I was just simply overcome with joy. I think all of us felt that way. In our own ways, we sought to endorse that. I'm so grateful to the Parks Department, a magnificent group of people who have served so well for so long, and to Mayor Hogsett for their leadership in making this happen. What a great day for Indianapolis. What a great day for Dan Wakefield. How exciting it is to drive up to this beautiful park where children have played with parents for so long in a beautiful neighborhood, and to see the sign Dan Wakefield Park. He is my friend, my guide. I really love Dan Wakefield and all that he does. I appreciate so much the fact that this dedication is occurring, and furthermore that the rain held up. Thanks so much.
Dan, would you like to come up and say a few words? I think we'd like to hear from you.
Thank you. It was 46 years ago, almost to the day, that Kurt Vonnegut wrote a review in Life magazine of Going All the Way. And he said, having written this book, Dan Wakefield will never be able to go back to Indianapolis. He will have to watch the 500-mile race on television. Also, it was one of the few book reviews that ever used the word putrid, because he said, Dan Wakefield's a friend of mine. I would praise his book even if it was putrid. He said, but I wouldn't give my word of honor it was good. And he gave his word of honor. You know, Vonnegut, we all know, was a humanist, but he reserved places in heaven for those he loved. He said that his wife, Jane, was up in heaven. He said that that Sam Lawrence, the publisher who saved him from smithereens, was up in heaven. So I'd like to think Kurt is up there in his humanist neighborhood and looking down on us and having a good laugh. And also like to think that my dear friend Ted Stagg is up there, and I know he's having a good laugh. And Vonnegut has just, he not only helped me, he saved me from smithereens. And he's still doing that. He's been giving me work ever since I left. I retired from Florida International University, first to edit and write an introduction to his book of letters and then his book of graduation speeches. And now I've just started on his book of short stories. So thank you, Kurt. There's so many people today here to thank. I also want to thank the initial thing that brought me back here in 2011 was the Vonnegut Museum. And I want to say it's not, you know, when you think of a museum, you think of it just a place with little artifacts and you go in there. But the Vonnegut Museum is very active, and they do all kind of things that carry out the causes that were dear to Kurt Vonnegut. Every year they have banned book weeks. They have a book club. They do all kind of things that promote great causes that Kurt would have loved. And there's so many people here to thank. I really won't thank all, but I do have to say that all of this being here today is due to Pat Chastain, who the great thing is I had never met him when he had this idea. That's part of the key to this. I think if it was anybody who had known me, they wouldn't have done this. But and Pat had just liked my books, which is really a great thing. So I thank him. And of course, I thank Senator Lugar, who I think he wins the prize for having come from farthest away, from Washington, D.C. to be here. And I remember in high school meeting Dick, and he asked me to come to his house one day after school, took me to his room, and I was very impressed. There was this beautiful, everything laid out neatly on his desk, sharpened pencils, an open notebook. And I went home that night and I said to my parents, there's a guy in our class who's going to be president. And my father said, you mean president of your class? I said, no, president of the United States. And I'm sorry that he hasn't been. And he should have been. And and also from our class, I see a lot of other people here, Art and Baxter. Well, Nancy went to Broad Ripple, so we think of that as a mixed marriage. And also my dear friends who I have these great dinners with, Janet Brucker and Patty Ball and Mary Janakis and Bob McCallum. I think Moto is up at WWC. He's here. Oh my God, he's come back from WWC. Donald Morris, and I heard Cindy Pittenger was going to come, and I even have my school 80 friend Gene Newdigate is here, I think. And yep, there he is. And I think, I don't know if Alice Ashby is here, but she's from School 80. I met her recently. So this has been a really great thing, and meeting up with all these friends and all these new friends you've heard speaking. And I just want to say that after this day, I have no need for a memorial service. Everybody can just go to the Red Key, play the jukebox, and have a drink. Thank you.
Dan, thank you. Before I introduce our last speaker, I do just want to say one thing, and that is, as wonderful as this park is, the best way to honor an author is to read his words, to read his books. And I hope that everyone today is encouraged to do so. And for those of you who are a little scared about going all the way, for younger readers, Under the Apple Tree is totally appropriate. So just consider that. Our next guest, please welcome Laura Bartolomeo, the music director of IPS CFI 84, and we're going to have a great performance here.
I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places that this heart of mine embraces all night through. chestnut trees, the wishing well. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, and everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is new, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you. I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places that this heart of mine embraces all day through. In that small cafe, the park across the way, the children's carousel, the chestnut trees, the wishing well. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, and everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is new, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you. I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places that this heart of mine embraces all day through. In that small cafe, the park across the way, the children's carousel, the chestnut trees, the wishing well. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, and everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is new, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you.
Excellent performance, great singing, great ukuleles. Thank you all for that so much. So right before it rains, we're going to wrap this up. I do want to thank everyone so much for coming out here today, especially, of course, Mayor Hogsett and Senator Lugar. Thank you both for being here today. I also want to give a big round of applause to our newest generation of readers from Mrs. Miller's and Mrs. Hammond's class, who've been incredibly well behaved and attentive today. And again, thanks to Patrick Chastain for getting this all moving and moving it forward, and to Indy Parks for this great recognition. We are now going to conclude and have the actual ribbon cutting to dedicate this park right behind me. So please join us.
Yes, they do. You think you can handle your own? Yeah. You think they can? Okay. Yes.
Everybody look this way. Look that way for pictures, guys. Everybody look this way, Dan. Everybody look this way. Walk out of Dell. Here we go on 3.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay, ready?
Adele, move that way just a little bit so everybody can see Dan Wakefield.
Yay!
Adele, move that way just a little bit so we can see the name. There we go.